This video is kindly sponsored by Squarespace. For any aspiring content creators or business owners, Squarespace is the perfect platform to get you up and running with your own website. No coding skills needed, instead select from dozens of pre-built templates which you can customize as much or as little as you want using simple, easy-to-use drag and drop tools. I'm currently using Squarespace to design and build a website for Galaxy Class Pictures, my new production company. The latest addition to the site is a merch store. Using Squarespace's intuitive tools, I was able to link my Squarespace site to my existing merch account, bring the products over for display, and customize the store layout however I wanted. Everything was sorted in less than half an hour, an ideal toolset and workflow for any online business. Follow the link in the description to start making your own website with your own domain name and use the promo code Rowan Coleman for 10% off your first purchase. Thank you once again to Squarespace for helping me keep the lights on over here. And now, on with the video. In 1999, the pop culture landscape was rocked by the release of The Matrix, written and directed by the Wachowski siblings, a cyberpunk action extravaganza and the culmination of an underground cultural movement which exploded into the mainstream. It was a critical and commercial hit, which soon birthed legions of passionate fans and long ponderous discussions of its themes and philosophy which continue even to this day. Naturally, Warner Brothers, the studio which had produced the film, was itching for a sequel, but even they were unprepared for how ambitious the Wachowskis' vision was. Following the smash hit of The Matrix, there was plenty of appetite for a sequel, and thankfully the Wachowskis already had ideas for not just 2 sequels, but numerous spin-off media as well. In 1999, during a trip to Japan with producer Joel Silver, the Wachowskis mapped out the full scope of their ambition to expand the Matrix story in multiple mediums: live-action film, Japanese anime, and video games. Despite the sheer number of projects proposed, overall everything was treated as a single story. The 2 Matrix sequels, The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions, were to be written and produced as a single film, while Enter the Matrix would serve as a sidequel, the short anime Final Flight of the Osiris would serve as a prequel, and the other shorts would fill in the backstory of the various characters and the universe as a whole. The scope of the production was enormous, rivaling the monumental undertaking of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. However, unlike that film series, rather than releasing the various Matrix works yearly, Warner Brothers wanted to make 2003 the year of the Matrix, releasing The Matrix Reloaded and Enter the Matrix in May, The Animatrix in June, and finally The Matrix Revolutions in November of that year. Further video games The Matrix Online and Path of Neo were later released in 2005. Most of the major cast members returned for the sequels, including Keanu Reeves, Lawrence Fishburne, Carrie-Anne Moss, and Hugo Weaving. Marcus Chong was asked to reprise his role as Tank, however contract negotiations soon broke down. The reasons for this are complicated and really worth its own video or article, of which several have already been made. If you're curious, feel free to seek that material out, but I won't deign to air all that dirty laundry here. Suffice to say, the character Tank was written out of the sequels, apparently dying off screen. His spot on the Nebuchadnezzar crew was filled by Link, played by Harold Perrineau. In addition to Perrineau, the supporting cast of The Matrix expanded greatly. Jada Pinkett Smith was cast as Niobe, Harry Lennox joined the cast as Captain Locke, Clayton Watson as The Kid, Anthony Zerbe as Councilman Hammond, Anthony Wong as Ghost, Ian Bliss as Bane, and Nathaniel Lees as Captain Mifune, named after legendary Japanese film star Toshiro Mifune. Inside The Matrix, Randall Duke Kim was cast as the Keymaker. Swiss martial artist Daniel Bernhardt was cast as one of the new agents, Agent Johnson. Playing the villainous Merovingian was French actor Lambert Wilson, while Italian actress Monica Bellucci played the Merovingian's wife, Persephone. The ghostly twins were played by Australian twin actors Neil and Adrian Raymond. Playing the Oracle's new bodyguard Seraph was Hong Kong action movie star Colin Chow. Reprising her role as the Oracle was Gloria Foster. However, Foster tragically passed away after completing her scenes for The Matrix Reloaded. The character was later played by Mary Alice for The Matrix Revolutions. Another tragedy also saw the untimely death of singer and actress Ilea, who was originally cast as Link's wife Z. Z was then recast with Nona Gay, and the character's scenes had to be reshot. Sean Connery was originally approached to play the architect. However, after reading the script, he didn't fully understand the plot or the character, and so declined the offer. German-Australian actor Helmut Bakatis was cast instead. Before filming, the production once again enlisted the help of master Yuen Wo-ping to coordinate the stunts, choreograph the fights, and train the actors. Building on top of what they had learned for the first Matrix, the cast were able to tackle far more complex sequences.
On good days of training, we get the steam.
December, January, February, March, April, May, June.
8 months of training.
It's harder this time.
They have improved a lot. They have the foundations of the last time's training. So based on that, the result coming out is really ideal.
Shit is hard.
Filming began in March 2001 at Fox Studios Australia. In contrast to the first film, very little of Reloaded was shot on location. Instead, enormous sets were constructed for exterior locations due to the complexity of many sequences, which necessitated the filmmakers having strict control over the environment. This included the park where the famous Burly Brawl sequence took place. The brawl took 27 days to shoot, with Reeves and his stunt double Chad Stahelski facing off against extras and stuntmen who were either Hugo Weaving lookalikes or wearing rubber masks.
Every afternoon for 9 weeks, me and 12 stuntmen on the floor went through a 5.5 minute routine. I believe I had over 500 moves. You know, we were doing 18-second takes with 180-degree steady cam where I have over maybe 20 moves, 25 moves.
They figured ultimately it was easier for me to just learn each move on the day. I actually got to know the first 10 or 15 Smith's moves, but ultimately on the day they changed anyway. So I really was learning the fight as they would in Hong Kong, which was just on the day.
All the Agent Smith doubles were pretty much auditioned. We auditioned about 50 guys, acrobats, gymnasts, martial art guys, regular stunt guys. Put them through about 4 months of training to mimic the actor Hugo Weaving, as well as learn the fight choreography and develop the skills they're going to need for this.
There were Smith lessons where I'd watch them run and I'd watch them walk and so I kind of gave them a few pointers, but it wasn't more than a couple of lessons really. Well, I realized how far my hair's receded. Normally I look at myself in the mirror and I think, yeah, here's all right. But here I'm looking at everyone from the side and I go, look how far it's gone.
When VFX costs were factored in, the Burly Brawl alone cost an estimated $40 million, making it one of the most expensive single action sequences ever made. The same applies to the freeway chase scene in the film. At first, the production went in search of a stretch of real motorway which could be used for filming. The city Akron in Ohio, USA, offered the use of their Route 59 highway. However, this proved to be inadequate. Instead, the production built a 1.5-mile-long freeway set at a naval base in California.
You walk around the corner and there's just this 1.5 miles of freeway. And the very end of it, it's backdropped by the most amazing vista of San Francisco. Sat at the end of it.
It's probably one of the biggest movie sets that's ever been built.
The set it's 1.5 miles long.
It was amazing the amount of material in it. It was like a big void. A bunch of railroad cars.
A great deal of concrete.
3 lanes of traffic. Flattage that's over 3 miles long.
I couldn't actually tell you how many pieces of timber go into it.
It's just a lot of
Times 20.
I forget that I'm on a set a lot of times.
We route traffic any way we feel like. Everyone's got enough space to try like full-on stunts with practice space, to spare.
And Carrie Ann, to her credit, can drive her ass off. She would do the 180s and the 90s, and within 2 hours, she was whipping the car around like she'd been doing it all her life.
One of my favorite things that I did in the film, and I got in one take, which was very exciting for me, was my sliding 90 into camera. I think they call it a juicy lift. It's all about brake and handbrake and sliding and hitting your mark and starting the turn at the right point.
The sequence also required Carrie-Anne Moss to learn how to ride a motorcycle.
Start off with a tiny little bike, master my tiny little bike, get on a little bigger bike. If it wasn't for RA, I would never have been able to get on the motorcycle and do that. Him and my stunt double, Deb.
Any last words?
Pray for us.
General Motors donated over 300 vehicles to the production, almost all of which were destroyed.
We've got 5 cameras on the back, and you've got operators on all the cameras, and I had this sign that was like above me, which was like the bail out point, you know, where if you went past that sign you were committed and you couldn't stop. Had all these cars barreling down behind the camera vehicle. I'm like looking at all these cars, and then, you know, I go, roll cameras, roll, roll, roll. 2 of the cameras didn't roll, and, you know, I look up at the sign, and like the sign's like, you know, 5 feet, you know, in front of me. So I go, abort, abort. And all these cars, we all come like to a screaming halt, and we stop, and I remember all these doors coming open, you know, and all these stunt guys like getting out and looking at me going, are you absolutely insane? What did you call a board for, you know? And I said, well, the cameras weren't working.
For the visual effects of the film, Warner Brothers created their own visual effects studio, ESC Entertainment, a team which included John Gaeta from the first Matrix. While bullet time had wowed audiences in the first film, the use of physical stills cameras meant each sequence was extremely time-consuming and costly to plan and execute, which made the same approach for the bullet time sequences in Reloaded far too cumbersome. Therefore, the ESC team sought to make the camera entirely virtual, which meant not only creating entire environments, but also costumes and the actors themselves. To this end, they developed a new technique they called universal capture.
So we built a system that we use multiple high-def cameras, use them to shoot an actor, and then we can reconstruct that actor's facial performance. Every little muscle movement, every mouth movement, eye movement, teeth movement, all of that can be reconstructed so that we can then fly around that with a virtual camera. So we can then stick that onto a live person's body or onto a synthetic body.
The problem with working on actual humans is they're so recognizable. You look at humans every day, you're very unforgiving when you see CG hair or a CG face or any of those things.
It would take an animator who was basically the Picasso of his time to actually completely freehand a performance like that.
Don Davis also returned to compose the music for Reloaded, reprising many of the motifs he created for the first film. For a number of action cues such as the Burly Brawl and Freeway Chase, Davis collaborated closely with the multinational music group Juno Reactor. Davis's orchestral style was mixed with Juno Reactor's techno and club beats for a more high-octane, fast-paced sound. After a grueling shoot and incredibly complex post-production, the highly anticipated Matrix Reloaded was released on the 15th of May 2003. Unlike the first Matrix, which has received near universal acclaim, its sequels are much more controversial. While I do agree that Matrix Reloaded isn't as good as its predecessor, I think the dismissive attitude some fans have to the film and the derision it often receives in online circles is quite unfair. Regardless of its flaws, The Matrix Reloaded is an incredible filmmaking achievement, which should be commended for its ambition and imagination. In a sense, Reloaded does what any good sequel should, expanding on the story, characters and world of the first movie and taking those elements in interesting, unexpected new directions. The movie hits the familiar beats of the first Matrix, but it isn't long before we're presented with new and exciting additions to these familiar elements. Seeing more of the real world, the city of Zion, the free people who reside in it, provides us with greater context for the larger conflict as a whole. And if we thought we'd seen everything the Matrix had to offer already, Reloaded bombards us with striking new visuals, locations, characters, and ideas. True to Morpheus' words to Neo, we're truly seeing how deep the rabbit hole goes. But while this is an impressive looking and sounding movie, it's also true that it's quite flabby in places. The first Matrix is tight and efficient. A truckload of detailed world building and complex exposition is dumped on the audience, but it never feels dull or boring. The exposition is delivered so creatively and paced so well that on the rare occasion it does slow down to ponder philosophy, it feels like a well-earned breather. Reloaded, however, doesn't strike the same balance. There are numerous scenes where the plot seems to pause so characters can discuss the film's various themes at great length. While the content of these discussions is genuinely fascinating and the dialogue is delivered well, it does result in the movie feeling very stop and start at times. The movie kicks off with Neo battling agents, and then we have a long talk with Councilman Hammond about the nature of coexistence. We get an awesome fight between Neo and Seraph, and then a long talk with the Oracle about free will. There is a veritable lecture from the Merovingian about something similar, and then Neo throwing down with his henchmen. This sometimes has the effect of robbing the main characters of their agency as they sit or stand in place being talked at. To reiterate, the content of this dialogue is very interesting and the overall story direction is exciting, but I don't begrudge anyone for getting a little bored in these scenes. That isn't to say there isn't plenty of captivating action and drama within the film, far from it. Reloaded has some of the most incredible action set pieces in cinematic history. The Burly Brawl is utterly jaw-dropping in its choreography. The speed and efficiency with which Keanu Reeves moves in this scene is simply breathtaking, and the direction, music, cinematography, and editing is virtually flawless. What lets this sequence down, however, are the fully CG shots. Comparisons are often made to video game cutscenes, and I do see why. Make no mistake, these effects were truly state-of-the-art at the time, and the amount of innovation needed to pull them off is very impressive. But in the end, I think the visual effects team simply hit a ceiling in terms of what the technology was capable of at the time. While this was a huge leap forward, none of it looks especially convincing, and each time the scene cuts between live action and full CGI, it's pretty jarring. Those same issues aren't present in the freeway chase though, which is mind-blowing. The sheer scale of this sequence beggars belief. What would be the climax in any other action movie happens within a single vehicle of Reloaded's freeway chase. Not only are there amazing car stunts enhanced by spectacular visual effects, but we also get a bike chase, fight scene, and stunning last-minute rescue. And these are just the highlights in terms of action. The Agent fight, Seraph fight, and Chateau fight are all brilliant pieces of martial arts action filmmaking and performance. Though a lot of it may not be very emotionally involving, it's hard not to be at least impressed. But for all the film's strengths, the true culmination of its weaknesses has to be the architect scene. The revelation that the prophecy of the One is merely another system of control by the machines, and Zion's destruction has already happened multiple times, is massive. Not to mention incredibly ballsy as a creative direction to take the story in. And Neo having to choose between the woman he loves and saving humanity offers exactly the kind of high emotional stakes much of the movie is missing up until this point. Which is why it's such a shame this huge twist is delivered in yet another long exposition dump, where a main character just kind of stands there. I genuinely don't blame anyone for not even knowing what the hell happened in this scene. What should have been the moment the rug is pulled out from underneath the audience's feet with a mind-blowing twist, instead understandably leaves a lot of people either bored or confused. That being said, once the weight of the architect's revelation properly sinks in, the following scene is the culmination of all the movie's strengths. Although I heaped praise on Neo's various fights throughout the movie, it's Trinity's fight against the Agent near the end of Reloaded which is easily the most gripping. Just like Morpheus' clash with the Agent early in the film, this confrontation is filled with danger, as Trinity doesn't have the luxury of Neo's powers to fall back on. Unlike the elaborately staged set pieces surrounding Neo, this fight is gritty and visceral. The tension mounts as Trinity draws ever closer to her prophesied death, with Neo accelerating beyond supersonic speeds in his desperate attempt to save her life. And in a fitting bit of dramatic symmetry, just as Trinity was able to resurrect Neo, he too resurrects her. While some may cry Deus Ex Machina, for me the emotion of the scene really works. In a radical reassertion of his own agency and a rejection of the destiny given to him by the machines, Neo refusing to let Trinity die is a truly powerful moment. Ultimately, The Matrix Reloaded is kind of a mess, but in my estimation, it's a beautiful mess. I commend the movie in its ambition, and as a sequel, it builds on the foundations of the first Matrix in exciting and surprising ways. It certainly has its fair share of problems, and I can understand why a lot of people were left disappointed. In spite of its flaws, however, The Matrix Reloaded has really grown on me over the years. While it doesn't manage to live up to the first Matrix as a sequel, it's still very much a worthy sequel. Hype for The Matrix Reloaded was high, and this was hype which translated into box office success. By the end of its theatrical run, the film earned over $741 million worldwide, supplanting Terminator 2 as the highest-grossing R-rated movie ever at the time. Despite its commercial success, however, it was not as universally acclaimed as its predecessor. While critics and audiences praised the action set pieces and general presentation of the film, criticisms were levied at its plot and pacing. The wider pop culture perception of the film soon turned sour, with many deriding it as overly complicated and boring.
Although the transport process has altered your consciousness, you irrevocably remain human. Ergo, concordantly, vis-a-vis. You know what? I have no idea what the hell I'm saying.
This was a sentiment which potentially posed a danger to the success of the so-called Year of the Matrix. Even though the lingering questions surrounding The Matrix Reloaded would be somewhat answered by the end of 2003, the larger legacy of the Matrix trilogy would prove to be a little more complicated. Thank you for watching. If you like my videos, be sure to like, subscribe and share, and make sure to hit the bell icon to stay up to date with all of my new uploads. If you want to help the channel grow, join my Patreon or YouTube members using the links down below. There you can see videos early as well as some exclusive content. Speaking of which, I'd like to quickly thank all of my patrons and members who are now appearing on screen. Have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper.